Well, good morning and welcome to Talk 20. This is where we will talk about how culture and faith collide. And today's topic is social media. So this is important for any of you who have influence on the next generation or use social media yourself. By way of introduction, my name is Lauren Burris. I am the Family Ministry Director here at Forest Hill Fort Mill. I am a millennial parent raising Generation Z. So I was born in 1983, but my kids were born in 2010 and 2013. So this is a very important topic in my household. And this is the panel today. I will be our host, and they're going to introduce themselves to you as well.
Perfect. My name is Andrew Weiler. I've actually been on staff here at Forest Hill for quite a while. I did children's ministry and family ministry for a long time, and then have moved into media, technology, and communication. So this is kind of the world that I work in a lot here at Forest Hill. I am a parent, so I'm a millennial parent, but like right on that edge of whether you're a millennial or a Gen Xer right there. And then I was born in 82, and then my kids, I have a daughter who's 11 and then a son who's 8, so Gen Z coming right up.
I'm Julie Sale, and I am a Gen X raising Gen Z. So I have 5 kids. I have kids in every decade or I have one in college, I have one in high school, I have one in middle school, one in elementary. So we're kind of seeing social media in all the different areas. So I'm a professional parent.
That's
Just
right.
kidding.
You are. That's why you're on the panel.
Not kidding.
That's not a real thing.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Jay Livingston, Generation X. I'm probably the oldest person up here, 1971. But I've got I think a millennial / Generation Z, and then 2 Generation Z. So I have a almost 21-year-old daughter, and then we have an almost 17-year-old daughter, and then a 14-year-old son.
That's awesome. So we are going to cover a lot of information and really, really quickly. So if you have a notebook or you have your phone, that's what we're talking about. You can take pictures of our information up on the screens. This is also being recorded for future reference as well. So here we go. You guys ready? All right. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about what the reality of social media and technology is and how it influences our lives?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, for us, we look at a lot is that the reality is all of us, no matter really what age we are, we're living a life that is both physical and digital. And I think that that's something that is really important for us to just think through, because as our kids grow up, my daughter is connected online as much as she's also connected in person. And I think that's one of the realities that social media, there's different products out there. And so whether you're talking Snapchat or whether you're talking Facebook, it doesn't really, in that sense, it doesn't really matter. You're engaging in relationships online as well as relationships that are face-to-face and in person. And one of the things that I think is important for us to just help our kids understand is how to build good relationships, whether it's on the digital space or in the physical space. And oftentimes they're actually help build on top of one another nowadays. So that's a big deal.
That's good. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the most popular platforms that we find ourselves on?
Yeah, what you find is you kind of see, we were talking about it earlier, Facebook's hit 16 years now, and so Facebook has kind of grown up, and so Facebook in general is at the bottom of this list of collectors of everything. So anything that gets produced in all of these other spaces kind of funnels down to there and to YouTube. But you have the younger generations moving into particularly Snapchat and TikTok are 2 of the fun ones. Honestly, I have to say, if TikTok was around when I was a high schooler, I would have been all over it. It's super fun. But I would say, so you've got, kids there. You've got Instagram, which is really popular. Obviously YouTube. People are watching, I think just a huge 95% of teenagers are on YouTube. So, watching something on YouTube on a regular basis. So it's a big platform.
That's right. Can you tell us a little bit more about how social media influences us both positively and maybe some of the negative?
Yeah, I think one of the, we were looking through some of this stuff before, and one of the interesting things that I have found is that teenagers and also adults feel the same good parts of social media and the same negative parts. So there is the good part of social media that allows us to connect with friends, even make friends that maybe aren't even in the same state, and build these relationships and build connections. And so that continues to happen in a lot of great ways online. And then the negative side of that also is things like, everybody's aware that there is cyberbullying. That's a real thing. That also social media can create these feelings of comparison comparison and anxiety and depression because it's, everybody's showing their best face. And so you're looking around going, my life is not like everybody else's. And those feelings are actually universal. So that happens for adults. And that also happens for teenagers. And sometimes in those younger years, it becomes really acute and it becomes really difficult because you just haven't learned how to develop and process through what you're thinking or feeling in those spaces. So that's where parents, I think, need to really come alongside their children, students, teenagers, and say, how are you experiencing the relationships that you have online, and how are you when you're watching something on social media or you're engaging with friends? Like, how is that really making you feel? What's going on in your head? Because those are important conversations to help process. In the same way you do that after they come home from a day at school and be like, oh, how was school today? What happened? Did this? Were kids nice to you at recess? Or as they get older, like, what are your friend groups doing? That same conversation needs to happen online. That same conversation needs to happen so that you're helping them process what's going on, what they're experiencing, seeing, feeling, and thinking on that same space.
That's good. So why is it important that we have this conversation also as Christian parents? How does this collide and connect when we talk about social media and faith?
Yeah, I think that two sides of that is, one, because we live online all the time, we just have to recognize that you have to be a Christian in every facet of your life. And that means being a Christian, when you go to school and the places you're in physically, but also the places that you exist digitally, that your faith needs to take on a real quality online. One of the things that's true about a phone is, like, we feel a lot of times like this phone is a very private space. It can be, even when you look at people on their phone, they're like hunched over. Like, if you ever watched The Lord of the Rings back in the day, it's like Gollum, like just my precious thing that you kind of hover over. And that can be it starts to feel really private. But the truth is, everything you're doing online is actually way more public than things you do in kind of the day-to-day life that you have. And so recognizing that you have to live in the same way. And so as a parent, you're calling your kids to live in the same way that you want them to live day-to-day online as well. It's also a great opportunity, I think, because so many people connect and because you have so much reach, that's a great way to actually share your faith and to grow in your faith and to engage in conversations. And what's funny is, younger generations are much more willing, the studies are showing, much more willing to engage in conversations with people who are different from them and have a level of respect in those conversations that sometimes us, as we get older, don't have. So it's actually an interesting phenomenon that you see a little bit more openness in conversation and care for people in the digital space for younger generations than older generations.
That's good. Because the reality is that we live in a digital world, and our kids and students are going to be on social media and online and using their devices. So how do we, as parents in the older generations, coach them and teach them how to use it responsibly and with integrity, right? And so this starts as young as preschool. Preschoolers have access to TVs, to your iPad, to your phone. I can't say how many times I've been out to dinner and how quick a parent is to hand their 2 or 3-year-old their phone to watch, Paw Patrol or whatever it is. And so at each phase, it's important for us to make a plan in how we're going to coach and parent our kids. And so for preschool, we say that they can enjoy the advantages, but we need to create boundaries that cause positive exposure to content. Right? And then in elementary school, that we help them explore their possibilities and create core values and build on their skills on how to navigate online, but also to help them identify what's good and what's bad. And then in middle school, we help collaborate a plan with our child to help them respect the limits and be responsible socially. And then in high school, we want to help them establish personal boundaries and collaborate a plan with them as well to leverage online opportunities so that they can succeed without us. Because like I always say, we are not raising children, we are raising adults who will eventually leave our homes. So they need to be able to succeed without us. So our expert parents up here, Julie and Jay, what are some ways that you have collaborated with your kids around social media and technology?
Yes, I think probably the most important thing, right, and everything that I'm going to say is way easier said than done. So, right, so let's just qualify it up front. But I think the most important thing, and it's almost with anything that you do, whether in a work setting or a home setting, that you have to have open communication and dialogue about these things. I can remember when our oldest daughter, who's I mentioned earlier, is getting ready to be 21, when she was 13 or 14, came to us with the great idea of having her own YouTube channel. And my wife and I talked about it, and we felt like one of the qualifiers for her earning the right to be able to put herself out there in cyberland was, you have to create a presentation. You've got to sell us on why this is a good idea. So one of my favorite questions to ask, and one of the most difficult questions to answer, is why? Right? Why should you be able to have something? Why should you be able to do something? And I think if you put your kids in a position to be able to talk about those types of things, they really have to think through the process, and they really have to think through what are some of the reasons or some of the ways that I'm going to try to influence my potential audience, through this situation or through this opportunity. And so that's just one of the ways I think maybe that you can think about collaborating. But the other piece I think that's really important is about establishing boundaries and then talking about another C word, consequences. Right? What are the boundaries that we're going to establish? And then ahead of that, what are the ways that you might potentially feel a consequence should the boundary be broken?
Yeah, I would say similarly, it's really getting to know your kids and their hearts. So every child is different, and this is very much part of their world. So it's getting to know how they operate, what makes them tick, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and helping them come up with a plan that's best for them. So I think with our oldest, we were pretty hard on him. We really established a lot of boundaries, and we didn't allow him to have freedom to kind of figure things out on his own, which caused a lot of sneakiness. Because of that, we had so many conversations. We reevaluated what we were doing as parents, and it ended up being much healthier later when he was able to figure out his own boundaries. And he needed to do that. That was best for him. Our second one uses it to sell stuff on Facebook because he's a little entrepreneur. So that's really the only thing he uses social media for. And our third one has decided that he didn't like the way he felt when he saw other people doing things. So he had a lot of FOMO. So he just got rid of social media altogether. So that was the way he handled it. Our next one does a lot of TikToks, so that's happening in our house constantly. So for her, it's conversations about time control, self-control, boundaries, and also just enjoying it and having fun. So sometimes I'll hop in there and try to learn a TikTok with her, which doesn't always end up really. She won't post those, so oh well. I'm so sad. Just kidding. And then our last one we don't give our kids phones until they're 6th grade. I think we're going to talk about that later. But so she's in 4th grade, and she has seen how the phone takes away from her relationships with her family. So she really feels that and expresses that in a lot of ways. So we've had different conversations about us and our phone activity because it really harms our relationship with her. In fact, yesterday we were hiking up a mountain, and we got to the top, and we were really cold, and so we took a picture. And then I was like, let's go. We have to go back down the mountain because we're cold. And she was like, you just took that for Instagram. That's the only reason why you took the picture. And I was like, oh, I think you're right. Yeah. So we're all learning. We're all dealing with this.
That's good. So both of you have mentioned boundaries. So what are some practical boundaries that you have established in your household? So and Andrew, you can answer this too. If I were to spend a day in your house, what would I experience technology-wise? And when do phones go away? Do they go away? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so for us, we really try, and this starts with us as parents not using the phone at the table. And a lot of times we fail in that, and our kids will catch us. But it's really important for us to have conversation at the table. So really no phones at the table. We don't love having phones upstairs, and definitely at night they are charging down on the counter downstairs.
Yeah, so from a boundaries perspective for us, it's the same thing, right? We do everything that we can to try and cordon off time as a family when there is no technology. But as Julie mentioned, right, it's really, really difficult because it's really tangible to each one of us in our daily lives. But I think the really important thing is, and I always go back to, from a boundaries perspective, there are times when, your kids are at school and they witness one of their friends using an app or doing something, and they notice that that person's getting a lot of attention. So when I think about boundaries, I also think about, listen, don't download anything, right? Or don't think about signing up for an app, right, until we've had a conversation about it, right? It's really important, I think, as parents to be informed on these things, but also, too, for them to understand that there's a check step process in place here, right? So just because something is available doesn't mean that you should do it and that we would approve of it. And so from that perspective, I think it's really important. Again, I always go back to, communication, dialogue, right? These things are really important. If you're successful in your professional life, it's probably because you have a really collaborative and communicative type environment that you're working in. The same thing, right, is something that happens at home. And the really cool thing about being a parent in home is you're the one who gets to create that culture. And so I think that's really important, right, just to think about in terms of, how you leverage social media and these apps, right? This can be a really thoughtful and creative outlet for our kids, but it can't be as thoughtful potentially or as creative without the influence of your wisdom, right? Having observed and lived life. Those are things where you get to influence the way that your kids are understanding how these things can be used for something positive.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add there from our perspective is that's absolutely, I agree with all that, especially the charging at night and everything else and engaging. But one of the things I've heard is trying to have 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and 1 week a year where you actually disconnect and just unplug in that space. Because as a parent, I know I'm always checking my phone. My wife and I are probably the worst technology addicts at our house, for sure. So, but that's what I would say. And then finding just 1 day where you can really try to disconnect is pretty helpful.
That's good. I know in our house, we do no screens during the school week. So Sunday through Thursday night, our kids don't get to be on screens. We're those parents. So they look forward to Fridays and Saturdays when they get to play Nintendo and watch TV and be on the computer. But something else we use in our home is called the Gryphon. It is acts like a firewall, basically, and we can control the content that our children are seeing online, but also how much time they spend online. So it'll shut a phone off, it'll shut a TV off, it'll shut a computer off, and anytime anybody logs on, we get a notification on our phones. And so there's resources out there like that so that you can be a part of and just be aware of what's happening in your home online. But we're going to wrap up here. Andrew, can you give us some resources online? I know we have some things outside for you guys to take with you, but what are some other resources?
One of the things is when you're just trying to take a look at a general picture, there was 3, and I don't know if we can have them out there or just we can send up a follow-up email, but the idea around, there's a New York Times article that I found that was really helpful about just some steps to kind of look through. There's also Common Sense Media. If you go to Common Sense Media, .org, yeah, they have a lot of good stuff, and then there's a couple of good guides on Focus on the Family as well that kind of dive in on how you might experience and learn some of that stuff. So a couple of those places are really good resources.
That's good. And we have timelines for you available. There's going to be one up here on the screen, but they look like this, and they basically walk through technology responsibility from birth through high school. So these are really, really great. You can put them in your Bible or in your journal and study them and read them, or read them with your children. Those are really great. And then we also have parent conversation guides for every phase. So preschool, elementary, middle school, and high school about how to collaborate and make a plan for your family when it comes to social media. You'll also find some books out there that you can purchase on Amazon. Faith for Exiles is an excellent book. And then the other one is Parenting in a Digital World by Kara Powell, and that is very, very, very good. So both of those resources, you could take a picture of them, but they're available to you online, but you can also take the printed versions as well. So Talk 20 is over. We hit our biggest topics that we wanted to in here for social media. If you would like or have any questions and would like to continue the conversation with us, we'll stick around. But find us at any time, and we hope that you have good conversations at home. All right, we'll see you guys later.